Hello, so today we're going to be going over emblems. I'm going to be talking about emblems and how strong I think certain emblems are for different traits. It's a fun little tier list to kind of just get a nice little relaxing vibe on the weekend. If you're in NA, it's Super Bowl weekend, so you know that's going to be fun if you're watching the big event that's going to happen tomorrow. But either way, if you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'm usually doing a guide every single day, doing daily TFT content, and I also supplement that with VOD reviews as well as other reactions and patch notes. So please make sure to like and subscribe. We're almost at 6,000 subs, which is really massive, much higher than I ever thought I would get within the last couple months. So I'm grateful. But also, I also have my art store open now. I always like to advertise a bit. I'm actually going to be doing work for a convention, hopefully. I did all my applications today, so I was super busy. But I do art. This is what I used to do before TFT, so this is like a Jinx and Caitlyn UKOA style print that I have. But of course, if you like anything or if you see anything that you like, it's all integrated with YouTube as well, so you can check out some of the art from my art store. But anyways, let's get back to TFT now. Enough of the little intro. The way that we're going to be ranking these emblems, I'm going to try and balance them between the strength of the comp and the strength of the impact on said comp. So like there's some comps that they spike really hard with an emblem. There's some comps where an emblem is pretty much meaningless. But typically, like when you see an emblem, and a lot of times if you're looking for an emblem, it helps you with direction, it helps you to strengthen your board in general, and it kind of unlocks a lot of potential with playing around different units. Emblems are really strong, especially if you find 6 costs. A lot of times, the most broken holders of emblems are just 6 costs because you more easily can slot them into your board. However, I do want to talk about what the emblem does for the board and how powerful it could be, and then kind of rank it in terms of like if it's really strong, if it's solid, or if it's more specific or very situational, where these emblems kind of don't really do that much in a lot of cases, so that you should typically just go for like a different augment like combat, or maybe make a different emblem in general. So let's start. Academy. I think Academy is in the solid tier. I don't think it's like an always instant click take. Sometimes it can be very bait, especially if you're starting out early and just like see an Academy as like a first augment. But Academy Emblem is very strong for the Academy comp. If you're in a spot where you're playing around Academy and you're trying to cap out very high with Academy, the emblem does a massive amount for it. It helps you to stabilize a lot earlier because it gives you an extra item earlier a lot of the time, right? You reach those thresholds, so you get your 3 items early. Which helps you in your mid game. It helps you set you up for late game, helps you to be able to more easily make it to higher levels and play around higher cost units because you get to save HP around being stronger with more items. Something that's really not spoken about with Academy as well is how much it buffs the actual unit. So for example, let's say you're taking an Academy emblem. A lot of times you're going to put on a Rumble or an Alawi, but you typically try and put on a frontline unit regardless, because the Academy emblem combined with Academy items gives so much HP. I think with 6 Academy, if you go Rumble 6 Academy 2 Academy items, he basically gains like 20 or more percent HP just off of being the Academy items with the extra damage amp and the buffs. And that's not even just talk about the damage amp, because basically like the Academy items give double to Academy units. So it's really high cap. It absolutely max caps your board, because a lot of times you're playing Academy with Sentinel units. So you get a bunch of HP with that, and then the damage amp as well works really well with somebody like Rumble, but you can also put on other units just to get the raw damage amp or the raw HP. It's very strong, and it's very powerful. So if you're playing around Academy, a lot of times an Academy emblem is a great way to like giga cap your board and put on a unit and make yourself really strong. And that's why, you know, I wouldn't say it's an instant take, because Academy, as much as it's like gaining popularity, I still think it's not like you see Academy emblem on 2-1, you're like, GG, I'm Academy. It's more of a situational thing, like do I have good Academy items, do I have a good spot for it? Now, Automata. So Automata used to be extremely broken, but they made 4 Automata a lot weaker. Like there was a big nerf that happened a couple patches ago. So now I've put Automata kind of in this tier of like very situational or often a waste of time. Automata Emblem doesn't do all that much throughout your mid and early game, because a lot of times, like if you're playing around Automata Emblem, the main board that you're trying to play around is like Kog'Maw. Sometimes you can play with Nocturne, but if you're playing Nocturne, you're more in like the Quick Striker build, which is a little bit different. But typically with Automata, 6 Automata is still very strong, right? There's nothing that happened to 6 Automata. So this is maybe like a little bit of a hot take. Technically, Automata Emblem, if you're playing 6 Automata, is broken. You're going to win the game for free. But 6 Automata needs a Malzahar, and you need to stabilize your mid game. And now 4 Automata is really weak. So like in general, the trait is just like, yeah, you just don't want to play it that much. And that's the problem with the emblem. So while it can cap very high, that's what I mean by it's very situational. If you're already like in a spot where you think that you can play very easily around like a Kog'Maw reroll, if you think that you're going to be stable in your mid game very strong, then yes, you can cap very high 6 Automata, you might even be game winning, but it fell off a lot of popularity now because it's almost impossible to get to a point of stability playing those comps anymore. Kog'Maw is really stall heavy, but stalling doesn't work that much because a lot of boards are optimized, and the meta right now is very heavy burst damage. A lot of the comps that are strong are ones that just the fight ends in 10 seconds. You don't have time for Kog'Maw to ramp up. Then if you're playing like Visionaries, you're better off just playing deeper into Visionary. So the Automata Emblem isn't going to help you that much. And then if you already have a Malzahar, it's like, well, at that point, you're probably already winning the game anyways. So it's like, that's why it's in a very situational tier. It's hard to make it work these days. Ambusher. Ambusher's in the solid tier. It's similar to like, Academy, right? Like that's what I'm trying to think of the right words for this. 5 Ambusher is something that exists without an emblem. It's not like you're reaching some higher cap because of the Ambusher emblem, because you can still fit in 5 Ambusher. You can still max out the trait without the emblem. However, the emblem is good for 2 reasons. Number 1, it allows you to stabilize earlier, like the complete opposite with like Automata in general, but like, or like the complete opposite argument that I was talking about with Automata, right? 5 Ambusher, hitting it earlier is very important, especially if you're playing reroll Smeech, if you're playing reroll Camille. These lines are very strong, but with 5 Ambusher, they get to that extra level where the units become unkillable because you get like this extra damage, what's it called? Damage negation. I forget what it's called. Durability. You get like extra durability for having 5 Ambusher, and because you're playing a comp composed of all melee style units where they're all in the front line taking damage, it significantly boosts their survivability to a point where your whole board is essentially becoming a lot stronger because of it. So a lot of times Ambusher is very capped out until you have a Jinx. Even if you have a Smeech 3, Camille 3, Echo 2, sometimes you don't win games, and sometimes you don't even go top 4 until you have the Jinx to knock in that 5 Ambusher. Getting the emblem allows you to hit that 5 Ambusher threshold earlier, even if you don't have Smeech 3 and Camille 3, or like Echo 2, even if you don't have your upgrades yet, it just stabilizes you so hard, which is why it's such a solid pick. Additionally, it's extremely broken on many different units. Warwick, other 6 costs now can crit their abilities, so that's insane. Rumble, critting all his abilities and upgrades if you find an early Rumble. There's many opportunities. And additionally, if you're playing around Ambusher, you don't even have to play like a 5 Ambusher like I'm talking about, like reroll Smeech Camille. You can just use it as a splash trait on like a Echo scrap board just to get an extra Ambusher to cap out a little bit higher. I had a game that I posted where I had like Ambusher emblem on Corki, and I found another Ambusher emblem, and I played 5 Ambusher with 6 scrap that I just high rolled into that type of spot. They gave you really good potential that way. Now, Bruiser. I think Bruiser is specific. It's good, but also bait. I think that just having a Bruiser emblem is good just to like give your whole board a little bit of extra HP, but it's kind of meaningless. You wouldn't really waste an augment on it, and often like it doesn't really matter unless you're playing a specific board. I don't think 6 Bruiser Twitch with the Bruiser emblem is that strong anymore. It just doesn't feel like it cuts it. A lot of times you'd rather like play towards Experiment or like other variations where you're dropping some of the Bruiser units. There's not really like a good board that just makes use of like the 6 Bruiser front line. So a lot of times like the emblem isn't that great. Now of course it does enable certain things. I talked about Twitch, right? You can still play 6 Bruiser Twitch, and this is actually one of the conditions that makes it a lot easier to play Twitch, is if you have a Bruiser emblem where you're able to like get an augment like the Frying Pan one that gives you extra HP. Some of these work out really well, so it's specific. It's not like a solid pick. You're often not like looking, you're like, oh hell yeah, I just hit Bruiser emblem, you know. It's more so like I can use this. And that's why it's like solid, it's good, but like if you're trying to play towards it, it could also bait you into like a worse line a lot of the time. Black Rose. So Black Rose is a little bit weird now. Like I'm inclined to I want to put it here, but I think it's like somewhere here. Like it's somewhere between specific and somewhere between solid. The thing with Black Rose is that I'm gonna put it in solid for now. Black Rose is really strong in capping out boards that don't have a lot of frontline, because basically Black Rose is like the cheapest way to just get an extra frontline unit and strengthen your board. It's also very flexible. There's a lot more lines that are becoming more popular with Black Rose as well. So Sorc is like the main use case for this a lot of the time, because you don't have much frontline with Sorc, and a lot of time you're playing Sorcs with Black Rose around LeBlanc and Zoe in your backline. Increasing your frontline just allows you to have a little bit more consistency in your burst damage. So a lot of times having a Black Rose emblem works out really nicely because you're already playing around Black Rose. This just makes the Scion a little bit beefier, and a lot of times, like even on level 9 with a Black Rose emblem, you can hit 5 Black Rose, 5 Black Rose, 6 Sorcs on level 9. Now the thing is, it's not that useful, right? A Black Rose emblem is good if you just get it or you just make it, but like wasting an augment on it isn't that great because it does, like, you know, buffing a Scion by a little nudge isn't super amazing unless it's like a very specific spot. That's why I'm saying it's somewhere between solid and specific. It's just that because it's so prevalent on really strong boards, it's a pretty solid pick, and it's something you should maybe angle. Like if you're a loot sub, that's something you should consider. If you're like even taking it as an augment isn't that bad if you have other augments that supplement your board, right? So if you're playing like Sorcs and you already have like a lot of combat and a lot of like damage, then you might look at it and say, okay, well this gives me frontline. That's the part that I'm lacking right now, and it's also like, you know, it's still a takeable augment if you get it through an augment is what I mean. Also, it's becoming a little bit more popular with like Dominators. Dominators with Black Rose is something that's creeping up a little bit. It's not strong, I wouldn't say it's very strong, but it's something that helps you to tempo. You know, getting in and just stabilizing your front line allows you that even if you don't have frontline upgrades, the Scion might be able to let you live or win a couple rounds on stage 4, and if you're trying to play really aggressively, which happens with Dominators, then it's a really solid pick for that reason as well. Quick Striker. So Quick Striker, I would say it's usually an avoid. I don't ever see a reason to make or play around a Quick Striker emblem. Like, I think there's like very, very situational stuff. Like, you know, you put on like a Warwick or like something like that. Like, I understand. But the problem is, 4 Quick Striker is achievable without an emblem, right? So, but it's not like Ambusher, right? 4 Quick Striker is a big spike, and you might want to drop maybe 1 or 2 of the units. But if you think about the units, right, if you're playing around Quick Strikers, what are you playing? You're usually playing a Akali Nocturne. Those are both 2-cost units, so when you roll for them, it's easy to hit both of them together. So often you want to play Akali and Nocturne because they're both 2-cost. Twisted Fate is like the main way you play it now. You play Twisted Fate with Loris, and then you have Akali Nocturne on your board. So it makes sense in that board. Now, on a Quick Striker emblem, if you get it like for free, it's like, yeah, it's cool, but you're not going to pick it in an augment because the last Quick Striker unit is Ambessa, and you almost always want to play Ambessa on any of those boards because Ambessa gives you armor and MR because she's emissary, and Ambessa also pops off with 4 Quick Striker. So you want to play Ambessa. TF is a good unit, and then Akali and Nocturne are both 2-cost that if you're rerolling, they help you. You can hit both of them for free because like you buy a lot of one of them, you get a lot of the other one. Right? Because you thin out the pool, it's efficient to buy multiple of the same cost unit. So this is good sometimes. Like if you're playing TF Loris reroll and you have a Quick Striker emblem, it allows you to maybe fit in like more enforcers or like cap your board a little bit higher there. But it's really not essential. You're better off just taking another style of combat or something else. Or if you're making an emblem, you're better off making like something else, right? Either more frontline traits or... because like, you want to play all the Quick Strikers anyways. Like you're better off if you have a frying pan, just make like a Sentinel emblem or make something else. Like of course if you have to make it, of all of these emblems, I want to say this tier list doesn't take into account the fact that if your spot dictates it and you have to make it, it's better than nothing, of course. And yes, you can play around it. Yes, of course. I'm not saying that you cannot. What I'm saying is you really don't need it. In my opinion, in most of those boards, you really don't need a Quick Striker emblem. Yeah, just avoid. Artillerist. Artillerist is like somewhere between specific and solid as well. So Artillerist emblem is kind of weird. Sometimes you take it, it gives a lot of AD. It has some really crazy synergies, like Artillerist emblem on like Ambessa is crazy, or on like other units that scale really well with AD. It works really aggressively with, but it's not like in the same solid tier because it's not that expensive. It's not that it's not that essential. Now 6 Artillerist is really high cap, so sometimes if you're playing in like a loot sub and you know you're getting multiple spats or like something like that, it works out nicely to hit 6 Artillerist because that's like a giga cap out. But you need 2 emblems to hit 6 Artillerist. So 1 Artillerist emblem, what does it do? You basically don't play Ezreal, you don't play Tristana, you don't play Corki, or you don't play somebody else. Urgot. And it's like, it makes sense sometimes, but a lot of times you're like playing those units anyways, and the boards fit in pretty nicely without the Artillerist emblem. A lot of times the only reason you take an Artillerist emblem is if you're like in a really awkward low roll spot and you want to hit 4 Artillerist, but you don't have the ability to level up. It's not because Corki is a bad unit that you're avoiding. It's not because Ezreal is a bad unit. It's because you're trying to play like enough Sentinel frontline. You can't make it to level 8, so you're playing like 4 Sentinel, 4 Artillerist on level 7 and you're putting an Artillerist emblem on like a Rel or an Alawi. Like it's not something that's like helpful. It's just more so like, let me just reach this trait because I can't make it there by leveling up on my own. And that's the part that's really awkward, because you're not really ever locked into not finding the unit. You're not really locked into a spot where you don't want to play one of the units. It's more so like, it's good to like hit the thresholds earlier if you're trying to cap your board differently. Like for example, you can fit in like 4 Artillerist, 6 Sentinel with one of these emblems, but it's like it's second fiddle to something like a Sentinel emblem that you would much rather have, if that makes sense. Makes sense? Hopefully. Experiment Emblem. Experiment Emblem, I think, is a strong / instant take. Now, I'll explain what this is in this tier and why it's above the other ones. Experiment Emblem early in the game is one of the most broken emblems ever, because with an Experiment Emblem, it basically doubles all of your experiment units. If you see Experiment Emblem, it is such a strong tempo ability for you to just cap out extremely high. It is insane. Now, it's not something that's going to win you the game, but out of all of the emblems, I think it is the strongest early game emblem. Now, you can argue other emblems, you can argue whatever, blah, 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 spot, blah, 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 whatever. I understand that. What I'm saying is, out of all the emblems, usually if you see somebody with an experiment emblem on stage 2, they are winning all of stage 2 and they are winning most of stage 3. It also unlocks the ability to play Twitch, usually with the experiment emblem. That's like the condition that makes it very easy for you to play around Twitch, which is an uncontested 4 cost, which you can use to tempo and cap very high on level 9. It's all about tempo. Out of all of the emblems, Experiment Emblem by far is one of the most important to play around certain units, as well as to strengthen your board. I think out of all of these, like maybe Academy on 2-1 if you have an Academy opener, but like there's very few emblems that make you as strong as this one does early game, and that's why it's in a strong / take. Like if you start the game out and you see an Experiment Emblem as an augment, that's like almost like, oh okay, do I have a Zyra on my bench? I do. I click it. Like a lot of times that's the thought process that goes on there, because of how powerful it is for those early to mid game. And then you could still play around Urgot reroll. It caps really high with 5 experiment. You can play like 5 experiment Urgot reroll. If you have a Warwick, it makes it a lot easier to hit like 5 experiment cap out around Warwick, which, you know, you always have to keep Warwick in the back of your mind, because Warwick is like the best unit in the game right now, so you always have to like take that into account. A lot of times I'm using Warwick as like an example in a lot of these for that reason, because it's like, okay, yeah, you can just play the best unit in the game easily with these emblems, blah blah blah, but you know what I mean. But that's why it's in a tier above the other ones, right? Of all of them, it's like Experiment Emblem is almost like its own augment. If you see an Experiment Emblem augment, like even without having to make one, it's just like, oh yeah, I'll click that and just play towards it, because I know that I'll like, you might not go first, because obviously if you low roll on Twitch, you don't make it to level 9, you don't make it to Caitlyn 2, you don't cap as high. I understand. It's not like a giga win. I'm not saying Experiment is the most broken trait in the game. What I'm saying is an Experiment Emblem is probably the best emblem in the game. And hopefully that makes sense. Family. I think family is waste of time and very situational. I think that this family comp is like, people still play it. I don't know. It feels like, how do I phrase this? It depends on, I don't know if your experiences are similar, but every time I see somebody playing family, I know that they're going bot 4 unless they hit 2 family emblems. Does that make sense? It's like 5 family is really, really broken and will win you the game, but 4 family is kind of like eh. And playing around family in general is pretty middling. It's pretty weak. I think that, like, you know, you can play it to try and get like a top 4, but like you're going like maybe 4th or 3rd at best, even if you high roll. It's very difficult to orchestrate. I think it does spike the board pretty well, right? Like it is good for the family board, of course. If you're playing around family, it's gonna be here, but it's just like in general, for how weak family is, I don't think that should be a default game plan. If I see a family emblem on 2-1, I'm not thinking to myself, oh, that's a family spot. It's very situational to actually take it or make it. I think family works really well in like loot sub, for example, because in loot sub, there's a good chance, like let's say you're playing loot sub, that's the only part where, that's what I mean, like very situational. I would play family in loot sub, because if I get another emblem, right, I get 5 family and then I can win out for free. So if I see that it's an emblem start and I have a family emblem, I just play the reroll. I play family from the start. It's actually really good there, because you have 5 family off the start of the game if the first thing is a spatula, right? So like stuff like that, it's good, right? But it's like, it's not that good otherwise. Firelight. I think Firelight is either in solid or specific good. I'm not sure exactly where to put it. It's similar to Black Rose, so I'll put it in the same tier as Black Rose. Firelight Emblem is very strong, not because of Firelight. It's hard to say. I would put it in specific. I think I would put it in. It's more specific than Black Rose. So let's put it from solid to specific. So Firelight caps out really high if you're playing 4 Firelight. 4 Firelight is something that's really reserved towards Zeri reroll. Zeri reroll isn't that great right now, but like if you like you know, Zeri reroll is like the compensation. If everybody in your lobby is playing reroll, you can play Zeri and just like tempo and play for placements, and you can get like a top 4 for free because other people are going to buy all the units. The Firelight Emblem itself spikes that board a lot because it just gives them a lot of power, but that's only with the Watcher variation, which is lower cap than the Sentinel variation. So like a lot of times when you're playing Zeri, you don't even play Firelight anymore. It used to be really popular when you would play like around Scar and Anger issues, and you get a Firelight Emblem, you cap out the board for free, but that board is a lot weaker in the modern style of play right now. So it's still something that's pretty significant. The part about Firelight that makes it really solid is that it caps your board really high if you already have like high cost units, because what happens with Firelight is they can sometimes dash the backline, so it's like a counter to so many comps. Like if you have Firelight activated on, like, for example, like a Rumble, and the Rumble just TPs to your opponent's backline then explodes, they just lose all their carries instantly. It happens so often, right? Like there's stuff like that where it's like very insanely strong. It's like giga broken, where you're like, yeah, I just win the game for free. But it's like, on average case, you shouldn't be like playing deep into the Firelight trait a lot of the times with those Firelight units anyways. I think the best users of it is if you're playing Ambushers. But if you're playing Ambushers, a lot of times you're better off just making another Ambusher emblem than playing like extra Firelights. But I digress. Dominator. I think Dominator is in specific good, but also bait as well. So Dominator right now is pretty weak, and it takes a lot of time to like scale them up. It doesn't fit well with the meta. But Dominators are getting a lot more popular because it's an uncontested AP line, and it recently got a little bit of a buff. So if you have tempo, if you have good econ, if you're very far ahead of the lobby, like let's say you have a lot of HP and a lot of econ, Dominator Emblem actually works out really well, and sometimes you can play around it because it allows you to hit those 6 Dominator and 5 Dominators, or sorry, 4 Dominator and 6 Dominators a lot earlier, and that's where you can really spike your board and have an overwhelming amount of AP, especially if your opponent doesn't have a fully flushed out board yet. It's really good for tempo. Now, it's not broken, it's not solid, it's not like an instant click, I'm a Dominator GG, because Silco isn't that strong of a unit. But the whole point about Dominator is that you want to make it, like when you're playing that comp, you want to make it to Mordekaiser. You want to make it to like high cost units, right? If you're playing Black Rose, like if you have LeBlanc 2, Mordekaiser 2, you kind of just win for free, right? So like if anything that makes you stronger in your mid game, which Dominator Emblem does, you can kind of tempo that really hard. Like if you start the game off in your 4 Dominator, stage 3 or 4 Dominator, you know, your Ziggs carry, your Cassiopeia carry, they absolutely delete everybody because the fights on stage 2 and 3 are relatively longer compared to the fights later in the game because, like, you know, boards aren't complete yet, right? When you're playing a game at TFT, watch on stage 2 how many fights go into overtime, and then watch on stage like 5 how many fights go into overtime. You'll see that there's like a lot more fights that last a while earlier in the game because, like, nobody has items. They're all just like, you know, pool noodle hitting each other, right? That's like the idea. Visionary. I think Visionary Emblem is in the solid tier. I don't think it's like a strong like instant take, or like you know, like really giga cap high type of thing. But I think it's like in the same tier as like Academy, Ambusher. If you have a spot for it, it's extremely strong. There's lots of good synergies with the Visionary Emblem, so you can put like a Visionary Emblem on Rumble, for example, and then he gets refunded on his Rocket cast so that he basically can infinitely cast. Visionary on lots of other units is strong, but also allows you to unlock playing like 6 Visionary on level 8, where you're just playing a Heimer carry. It's really hard to fit in a reliable comp if you're not playing Renata reroll, but with a Visionary Emblem, you can actually play around 4 cost, like Black Rose Visionaries, similar to how you would play around Sorcs in such an amazing spot as such. It really allows you to play multiple different ways, and it allows you to have different comps, and also works really well on different units. You can also put on like an Elise I've seen, and then she casts like 3 times in a fight, which is devastating. You can put on multiple units if you just want them to cast a bunch. But it's just Visionary is really strong as 6 trait. It's just really hard to not to play it without rerolling, because like the rerolling gives you so much effective power, right? If you have like a 3-star front line that you can heal infinite, it works out really nicely. And if you like have Renata 3, it's just like a really common comp that you see nowadays. But the Emblem allows you to not only spike a little bit earlier with the Renata comp, but you can also spike a lot earlier in such a way that you can play around like 4 costs. You can just play like Heimer Malzahar carry with it, because it gives you like the room on your board to construct enough front line to compensate for the fact that you don't have a 3-star unit as your front line unit. Make sense? Hopefully it does. If you haven't seen stuff like that, there's like high level players that do it all the time, and I talked about it a little bit in my video on Visionary, like my Visionary guide, if you want to see more. Pit Fighter, I usually avoid this. The only time I ever see people the only time I ever want to take a Pit Fighter emblem or play around Pit Fighter is if I already have a Pit Fighter emblem. Because like, let's say I just randomly have a Pit Fighter emblem, and then I have another Pit Fighter emblem, then you're 8 Pit Fighter, and then you can maybe win the game, right? Because 8 Pit Fighter is a 2 emblem trade, it's really strong, you can maybe win out. But very rarely, unless you're just taking it for like a synergy on a one particular unit, it often does nothing. Vertical Pit Fighter has been pretty bad for much of the set. Like, besides like the Violet reroll line, it's kind of like eh. I've been seeing some more 6 Pit Fighter boards that people are trying to play, but it's not like, you know, you just take or make a Pit Fighter emblem and that's like your go-to. A lot of times you're better off just making, like, you know, if you're making it, you're better off using the Frying Pan to make like a better frontline trait just to help out your entire board. Or you're better off just making like, you know, something else. But like, Pit Fighter is usually like eh. It's like a compensation prize if like everybody else is like playing something crazy, or you're on Embessa encounter and you already have a Pit Fighter emblem. That's what I mean. It's like, it's usually an avoid. Maybe you can put it here, but like I would just put it here because of how weak Pit Fighter is. Rebel, I think Rebel is like here or here. This isn't the same tier as like Bruiser and stuff. I think Rebel emblem is very strong if you're playing around Rebel. I think it's extreme. You know what? We'll just put it in solid. I think we'll put Rebel emblem in solid. No, we'll put it in specific. I'll put it at the top of specific. Okay, these aren't in order, but just know that Rebel is in order. It's very hard to judge Rebel because I don't think Rebel is that strong. Like I played it recently, even after the buffs. I don't think it's worthwhile to play around Rebel because all the units that you need for Rebel, you can just play Sorcs with them anyways. Like if you're trying to stabilize on level 8. So Rebel is only super great if you hit an early Jinx and you don't want to play Sorcs and you want to try and play a riskier uncontested line and maybe tempo off of it. It really doesn't feel that great right now because it just, like, I think Jinx takes a little bit too long. It's hard to stabilize around Alawi because she's hard to find. Zoe is giga contested almost always because of how strong Sorcs is still. So like, you're very rarely in a spot that you want to play around Rebel. However, if you are playing around Rebel, it is very good to have an emblem because it allows you to play better synergies on your board. You can Rebel emblem Elise, you can Rebel emblem Echo. It allows you to fit in synergies that help strengthen your board, but also allows you to cap a lot higher. So I personally wouldn't really try to play Rebel without a Rebel emblem, but at the same time, you know, it is what it is. Rebel is also the one of the few traits that I see, or sorry, Rebel is the trait that I see winning the most because it is a 2 trait that caps out very high. So a lot of times on Embessa encounters, people play towards Rebel just for the sake of, if I hit another Rebel emblem, I win the game for free because you can fit in 10 Rebel on level 9. It's within the realm of achievable is what I will say. For the power that it is, it's usually an instant first, and it's an achievable instant first because you only have to make it to level 9 if you're in an Embessa encounter or a Wandering Trainer, which is usually where you hit the double Rebel emblem. But I don't think it's as solid as the other options. Like if I put in solid tier, like come on, like somebody's gonna be complaining in the comment section for sure. Okay, next. Scrap. I think Scrap's solid. I don't know. It's here or here. Okay, I think Scrap is also in specific, but for a different reason. So, I don't think you need a Scrap emblem, ever. Like, Scrap emblem is good early game if you're trying to tempo, but Scrap a lot of times when you're playing it, you usually like to play it from behind rather than ahead, just to get, because the item quality matters so much more. with scrap, if you have good components with scrap, that's how you win the game, in my opinion. So a lot of times you don't even like to tempo super aggressively, so it doesn't even synergize with the trait well. The thing is, 6 scrap isn't hard to fit in. A lot of times with scrap, you have a lot of vacant spots on your board. So an extra scrap emblem doesn't matter that much unless you're trying to play towards 9 scrap, which is, again, one of those achievable win condition boards, but that's not really what we're taking into account in this tier list. It's similar to Rebel, that like, but in a different way. It's kind of like, you maybe take it if you have to, but it doesn't necessarily cap you super high. It basically just converts a component on a unit that isn't a scrap unit, which isn't that impactful, because a lot of times if you're not playing a scrap unit, if you're already playing around scrap, you're already working around your components and playing around the fact that certain components work on certain units. So that's what it means. It's kind of not very useful in that case. If you're not playing around scrap and you see a scrap and you want to pivot into scrap, then you want to convert components on some other unit and make them into like a giga carry, all it does is convert a component. So if you're playing some other unit to just convert a component, a lot of times you're putting a scrap element on somebody useless or some extra unit. Like it's not like it never saves your game. It's not like a crazy synergy, because you usually can really easily fit in 6 scrap, which is usually what you're playing around, and you already have enough vacant spots on your board where you don't really care too much about converting the extra scrap component on the particular unit, because if you have extra units, you'll just make the full items for them because you'll already rearrange your items the other way. However, it's still good, right? Because scrap is good a lot of the time. It's an emblem that fits with a board that's quite strong. Like scrap, I know it got nerfed a little bit. Like I think it was just like echo nerf. I don't know if there's a B patch that nerfed it more, but like it's not like the go-to strongest comp. Like it's a lot worse performing this set, like this patch right now. So I understand that, but it's still one of the more popular, reliable comps. It's just like now you just have to like, you know, hopefully be uncontested when you play it. If that's the case, you usually don't need the emblem, but it's not waste of time. And it's not very situational, because a lot of times if you're playing scrap and you see it, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll take it. It gives me some extra components. If you see it on a carousel, you're like, I'll take it because it's synergized with my board, even if I have to play extra scrap units. Oh, you know what the main thing is with the scrap emblem? This is why maybe it's like solid, is that it gives you the shield on the unit. I didn't mention that. Sorry, I've been talking mostly about the components. You could use it just to get extra frontline. Like you can just play 7 scrap with it and just have an extra unit on your front line, have a bunch of shield. Like that's the use case for it. That's why it's not in like waste of time or very, like it's still good, but sometimes it's bait. But like the main thing that you use it for is the extra shield you get, right? It effectively works as like a warmog. So you can think of it as like an extra warmogs as an item, right? You just put on a unit and they just gain a 800 HP shield or 1000 HP shield or whatever, which is effective HP, right? That's like the main use case for it. But I wouldn't put it up here because a lot of times you just don't really need it. You're like, yeah, I can just play without it. So that's why I put it here. Sniper, I put waste of time / very situational. I think sniper emblem is only good if you have 2 sniper emblems. I'm gonna say it. I have never had a board where I've played a lot of snipers. Trust me, I've played a lot of snipers. I played too much snipers, I would say. I've done every variation of sniper because I don't know. I just always find myself into some whack ass sniper spot. I'm not even joking. You can look at my channel. I've had commenters memeing about how many sniper videos I put out. That's just because I keep finding myself in these weird ass sniper spots. And I'm going to tell you guys, it is not a good emblem. It sucks. It's good on some units. Yes, you get the range, you get the stuff, right? Like Sniper Emblem Rumble. Oh, it's so cool. Yeah, I know, but it's just fucking ass. Trust me. Like, this is the problem, right? If you're playing a board where you play 2 sniper, you can usually fit in 2 sniper. If you're playing a board where you're playing 4 sniper, the emblem is kind of meaningless because it's not going to help you in order to fit in the front line and have everything work out anyways. Because a lot of times, if you're playing 4 sniper with a sniper emblem and you're trying to play a front line that's really sustainable, you usually have to be level 9 to fit all of that in anyways. So unless you have 2 sniper emblems, you're not going to be able to cap out very high. Now, a sniper emblem, you can also play 6 sniper technically with 1 emblem. But with 1 emblem, once again, your front line's going to be so ass that it's probably not even going to matter. You're going to die anyways. So with 2 emblems, you can actually hit 6 and 4 and everything is beautiful because you just play like, you know, the same way you play 2 sniper and 4 sniper without an emblem. With 2 emblems, you just can accelerate that by an entire stage or entire stage later. Snipers just take way too long to do damage. 3 of the 4 sniper sorry, how many sniper units are there? There's 5, right? There's 5 sniper units currently in the game. There's Caitlyn, which we'll talk about in a second. There's Maddie. There's Twitch, there's Kog'Maw, and there's Zeri. Of those units, Twitch, Kog'Maw, Zeri, and Maddie all are Guinsoo users. They all want to auto attack a bunch and they take a while to do damage, right? Zeri has to ramp up, Twitch has to ramp up. Maddie usually has to ramp up. She has an insanely long cast time, so it just takes forever. And Kog'Maw wants to ramp up. So that's why a lot of times when you're playing snipers, what's way more important is your front line rather than your back line. Because you need the front line to sustain yourself to let, like, you know, one of the 5 snipers that you're playing around ramp up damage. The only one that doesn't apply to is Caitlyn. Caitlyn's like very explosive and bursty. So having multiple sniper on her just makes her so she one-shots everybody. And I made a bunch of videos about this in the past, but a lot of times that's why you need 2 sniper emblems, because you just can't sustain the backline. That's why it's very situational. So if you're already playing around snipers, or you're like really high roll that you're already level 9, it's like, yeah, okay, then you can take it, but it's very situational. I wouldn't say avoid it. It's not in the same tier as avoid, because I still think that it's strong. But that's like maybe a me bias. But you can argue if you're somebody who is looking at this from an unbiased perspective and you think that I'm biased because of how much I play snipers, you can put it here. I just had a lot of success in spots with it when I get drop sniper emblems. I think all my cooking boards have been with snipers, so that's why I put it not in avoid. I put it in very situational. Sorc, strong/take. This is very different from Experiment Emblem. Sorc Emblem allows you to fit in your board a lot more easily. It also allows you to more easily play around Sorc Emissary, which is one of the highest cap boards currently in the meta. Sorcs, usually you don't need an emblem, but you can hit 6 Sorc without it. There's currently 7 Sorcs in the game. So you have tons of extra space to fit in all the Sorc units that you want. However, it allows you to stabilize a little bit earlier, because you can typically play more frontline with a Sorc emblem, and it can also cap higher because you can put Sorc emblem on Elise, so it just heals a bunch and she becomes really hard to kill. You can put Sorc emblem on Mordekaiser, so he just pops off with typical Mordekaiser stuff, right? It's a very strong emblem, and you should almost always take it. If you have AP items and you're maybe considering playing around Sorc, it is one of the easiest ways to make the comp more reliable, as well as cap higher. So I think it's a definitely take. It's not the same as like Experiment Emblem. Experiment Emblem is so strong because in your mid game it makes you so powerful, and then you don't really care about the end game. Sorc is more for like the end game. It just allows you to have the flexibility on your board to actually play around better units instead of playing a bunch of 1-cost units and like 2-cost, like, you know, instead of playing like a bunch of trash units on your board, you can cap out a lot higher with the Sorc emblem. That's essentially it. So definitely in that, just because of how strong Sorc is, that's why it's like, you know, a tier above everything else. It's like, compared to all these other comps, Sorc is probably one of the better emblems that if you see it, you're like, yeah, I'll probably play that because I was going to play it anyways. Enforcer. I think Enforcer is solid. Okay. Enforcer emblem is really broken if you have Enforcers. If you don't have Enforcers, it's not very good. So it's the very first or 8th. You know what? It's actually, I'll just put it here. I think Enforcer emblem is really strong. I'll tell you why. It's hard to debate whether it's in the strong/instant take or if it's in the solid. I think it's kind of bait sometimes, right? The problem with Enforcers is that no matter what, you're playing a very narrow line, and your damage isn't stable unless you have a Vi 2 and a Caitlyn. So with an Enforcer emblem, you cap very high. You instant win the game if you have an Enforcer emblem. But it's very first or 8th because you don't know how the lobby is going to shape out if you're going to hit hard enough to stabilize to then level. You can only really play it from ahead. So if you take the emblem, and like, it's good if you're playing Enforcers, but it's not good if you're not playing Enforcers, right? The difference between solid tier and like the strong/take tier is that the strong/take tier usually not punished if on 2-1 you just take it and play towards it. Right? Like that's the big distinguisher between the two of them, right? They're good if you're playing the comp, but they're also good outside of playing the comp if you just need to play towards something. It gives you enough of a solid direction where it makes you either really strong in your mid game or you have really high prospects for late game that is really good. Enforcer is sometimes bait. There are times where you take an Enforcer emblem and you go instant 8th because of it. Because you're just playing towards Enforcers, you don't hit your units, you don't stabilize, and things fall apart. And the main reason that that's a problem, I'll explain it very, very clearly for you guys. The main reason that Enforcer is different from the other emblems is because on level 8, without a Caitlyn, the main carry for Enforcer is Vi. And Vi is a frontline unit. That is a problem. Because if your Vi dies early in the fight, which happens sometimes if other people are high rolling harder than you, if you don't hit Vi 2, if your items don't work out perfectly, there are many ways for you to low roll in a game of TFT. Because she is a frontline unit, if you don't have a Vi 2, she dies and you lose the game. The rest of the chuckle fucks do not carry. And maybe TF does. Sorry, apologies to TF. TF can carry, right? But then you need TF items as well. So that's why it's in solid tier. It's an instant win, but there are so many times in my own lobbies, I'm sure you see it in your lobbies. Maybe it doesn't happen to you because you're the god of gold, or you're the prince of plat, or you're the herald of emerald. Like, I don't know where you are in your journey of rank up, but Duke of diamond. But like, what I'm trying to say is that watch enforcer players. There are so many of them that just crash and burn. And that's why it's in solid tier. Just because like you need to play it from tempo, so you can't just instant click this and think that you're gonna win. These ones are instant clicks a lot of the times because this one just helps you out all of stage 2, all of stage 3, and then you use your tempo and you figure out what you're playing. And Sorcs is just like a much more consistently reliable comp compared to enforcers, in my opinion. So it's a tier above it. You can put enforcer at the top of solid. It's like, it's debatable if it's here or here. Okay? Can you guys, I think that's throwing you guys a bone. If you think it should be here and I put it here and you're upset at me, just know it's fine. Just close your eyes and pretend it's here. I'm okay with either. I like, you know, it's fine. Sentinel. Sentinel's in solid tier. This one's really good. It spikes out a lot of boards. A lot of rerolls really spike with Sentinel. 6 Sentinel is really strong. Sentinel Emblem is really strong. Because the armor that you get for your whole team is typically a lot better than some of the other frontline traits. So it unlocks a lot of potential for your boards. It also allows most boards to cap very high. And it's also a really good random emblem that you can just take and play around. I wouldn't say it's as strong as, like, you know, the same idea of, like, you know, Experiment, Enforcer, or Sorc, you know, where you just know that you have, like, these really good spots because of the emblem. But it's just probably the best frontline one, so it just goes in the same solid tier, you know what I mean? Conqueror. I think Conqueror is specific or also bait. I think Conqueror Emblem really unlocks the ability to play Conqueror. A lot of times having 4 Conqueror on stage 2 and using it to tempo and getting the cash outs early allows you to actually play around Conquerors. But Conqueror is pretty bait. It's pretty bad. So it just goes in specific. Your spot really has to dictate for it to be good. Finally, Watcher. I think Watcher Emblem is specific, good, or bait. I think if you're playing around Watchers, a Watcher Emblem often allows you to hit that 6 Watcher threshold. You know what? I'll just put in waste of time or very situational. It is just very situational. Watcher feels the same way as, like, Automata Emblem. It's like, if you're taking a Watcher Emblem, a lot of times it's because, like, you're in a spot where you're playing some board that's using Watchers, like Zeri reroll. And the Watcher Emblem isn't that strong on a Zeri reroll line because you can fit in 6 Watcher anyways. A lot of times you're just taking it to try and, like, compensate for, like, low rolling at 1 point. But it's just, like, a worse board usually when you're taking Watcher Emblem. So that's why it's there. And Cameron doesn't exist anymore, so we don't have to rank it. Anyways, this is me ranking the emblems. Hopefully I gave you some information along the way, and it was a little bit interesting. I don't think there's much I would change. The tiers aren't, like, particularly ordered. And, like, you know, stuff can, like, be rearranged in between tiers. But that's just my take on it. I thought this would be a nice fun video and interesting, right? I'll flash the... Do I still have the text thing? This is mostly for fun. I should change this to every emblem. You know, point at the sign. Because I'm not going to answer annoying comments if they're like, technically, Enforcer should be in the higher tier. It's like, well, okay, sure. It's like, you know, they can wiggle around a little bit, but I'm just trying to explain the logical reasoning of how you should think about it. You should always be critical about taking emblems, especially as augments, just because, like, you know, you want to know, does this actually strengthen my board a lot of the time? Is this something I can actually play around? Instead of just saying, ooh, synergy, because a lot of times, like, there's combat augments that can help you even more so than the actual emblems, and that's really important. That's the whole point of this tier list, just give you guys a little bit of critical thinking juice if you want to consider these. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and see ya. Bye-bye.